Good evening. I will be talking about the case study over copyright and the computer regulations governing technology. So our case background, who's involved in the situation? So we have the St. Regis K through 8 school, the St. Regis PTA, Mr. Sample, who is a third-year principal, Mrs. Lynn, who is a library and media specialist, as well as running the computer lab, and Mrs. Brandon, who is a teacher who's new to St. Regis this year. So a summary of the case. So St. Regis is a rural K through 8 school with 420 students. They have limited computer access and have recently purchased new software programs for the computer lab, which has 20 computers. After installing the software, Mrs. Lynn made copies and began distributing these copies to classroom teachers to use on their single computers in their classrooms. Mrs. Brandon made Mr. Sample, the principal, aware of the situations as she has concerns about a possible copyright violation because she comes from a larger district who took copyright very seriously. So now Mr. Sample, the principal, is tasked with finding a solution to this sharing of software. In doing so, he has to educate staff and the community on the importance of copyright law in order to make sure that this goes over well and that a positive solution is found for all sides. So to kind of dive deeper into the St. Regis community, it's a small rural community. It says they're 25 miles from the big city. The community is very supportive of the school. The PTA does fundraisers in order to fund the school, and the PTA is very active, very supportive. St. Regis School, again, small rural school. It's only a K through 8 with 420 students. Their computer lab has 20 computers, and they have limited funding for technology. So, what copyright violations occurred? So, the teachers come to Mrs. Lynn with this idea for utilizing the software on their individual computers in their classroom. Mrs. Lynn makes copies of the software to save money. However, she does so without the author's permission. Again, we have limited funding, so Mrs. Lynn, her heart is probably in the right place, but she does violate copyright. According to connectsafely.org, any original creative media, sound, image, video, or text that is set in tangible or digital form is covered by copyright. So once that software was created, it's automatically covered by copyright. And because it costs money, because there was a price associated with it, generally that is going to mean that it is under more strict copyright, and so something like fair use may not apply. And so here we go. Material is automatically protected by copyright as soon as it is put into tangible form, according to Simpson. You do have some educational fair use that can come into play in these situations at times, but this would not be approved of here because, again, this is a software that cost money and was under copyright, and so therefore, in order to continue to use it, we don't know the exact copyright policy for this program, but I would assume that since they bought 2 of them and each of them cost a certain amount of money, that you can't buy it and make as many copies as you want. So that would take away the educational fair use. And there's also the moral and legal issues. Again, it's not right to do this. That hurts the creator of the software. And then you also have the legal issues and the consequences of that, which we'll go over later. The critique that I have for the case study, we don't know the views of the creator of the software. We don't necessarily have the specific policies and if they're willing to give permissions of the copy to make copies. We don't know if the school has any copyright policies or guidelines. So, Mrs. Lynn could be under a little bit more pressure from a principal if there was, very point blank cut and dry policies for copyright issues. So what do we need to address? There are multiple groups and individuals involved in this situation, and Mr. Sample has to address all those accordingly, and he has to, he wants to keep a positive reputation in this community. So there's some issues that could arise. You have hostility towards Mrs. Brandon from Mrs. Lynn and other teachers because, she kind of told on them. Less access to learning software for students, unfortunately. Distrust of Mr. Sample himself from teachers because, what he did maybe took away opportunities for students. You could have loss of PTA or community support, particularly towards Mr. Sample. And you also should be fearful of the reaction from the software company. So Mr. Sample, communication is going to be key here for him. He must inform all parties about the situation and address the severity of it. First and foremost, if I'm a principal, I'm going to communicate with my superintendent about this situation. So again, I would, depending on where the office is, it doesn't say if there's a superintendent. I'm assuming that there has to be in this setting. So Mr. Sample should inform his superintendent about the situation, and he should also use that opportunity to advocate for his students' future success. Because if, in a rural district that's 25 miles from the large city and from the high school, I think that is a perfect time to say to the superintendent, look, I'm not sure if we're getting the same treatment as maybe some of the other schools in the district, and I'm scared that our students are not prepared to use the technology that's being used at the high school level. And then to kind of advocate for more funds or different things like that for the school of St. Regis. But open communication with your superintendent is always important, especially when it comes to legal situations, possible legal situations. I think then Mr. Sample needs to address the staff in a all-staff meeting. And while informing them of the situation, I don't think he should, there shouldn't be any naming names. And in fact, I think Mr. Sample should take the blame because he has not set a precedent and set a standard for how copyright should be used in the school, and has not been open with that, has not put that on the school website, has not maybe done enough trainings for that. And I think in taking the blame, he's going to be able to take some heat off of teachers like Mrs. Lynn and like Mrs. Brandon. None of them are going to feel like they're being called out in this meeting. He needs to discuss the importance of modeling digital citizenship for students because, hey, we need to show our students how important it is to follow copyright laws, how important it is to advocate for the creators of content and be appreciative of them, and they deserve to be paid for that because, hey, our students could be in that situation someday too, and we want them to be taken care of if they're creating things that deserve monetary rewards. And I think he should also share the consequences that can occur with copyright infringement. According to Purdue University, Copyright Office, fines can range from $220,000 to $150,000 for each work infringed and can even result in jail time. So for a school struggling with finances, I think this would open their eyes to the consequences that could result. Step 2 for communication is speak to PTO leaders about the situation. So whether, I don't know if he could go to a PTO meeting or if he could call the PTO leader and just inform them about what happened. And one, say, again, use the opportunity to say thank you for all that they do to provide technology for the school, but also, again, to discuss the importance of modeling digital citizenship for students and say, hey, again, thank you for your financial assistance and everything that you do for our school. We will make sure and take care of this, and we will do everything that we can to fund this software to help our teachers. And if you can do anything else to help with that, that would be great. So now we've communicated with, kind of the necessary parties, I think now it's time to move forward with the action plan. Mr. Sample must respond with a plan that addresses each issue and shows his dedication to the school and the community of St. Regis, but also to the law. The PLO 6 operations and management, he's got to advocate for the future success of students and adults, but also he has to look at, hey, what needs to be done in the school, what needs to be done to further technology, help further community relationships and things like that. And he needs to do so in the right way and teaching proper digital citizenship. So step 1 of the action plan, stop the violations. He now needs to go meet with Mrs. Lin one-on-one and say, we can no longer copy any more software. We're not going to do that anymore. And she needs to understand that what she did was wrong. Mr. Sample should go and personally collect all of the copied flash drives himself and destroy those. I think him going and doing it himself shows that he is getting out in front of it and he is willing to take action. He needs to start a grant group, and I think this would be a great opportunity, especially for a rural district. They oftentimes have the ability to apply for grants, particularly in technology, because this is a shortcoming in rural areas. And I've been part of this at a previous school where we were able to write a grant for hotspots for students that didn't have Wi-Fi at home. So I think there's definitely a possibility there to get grants for technology. I think Mrs. Lin, using her resourcefulness, using her passion for the school, would be a great leader for this group. And I think she should definitely be asked in order to show your appreciation for her. This step will help to further the future success and well-being of both students and staff, Mrs. Lin, and others in the district. I think they'll feel valued and will be able to push technology forward. Create a school copyright policy. Mrs. Brandon obviously has knowledge on this topic. She would be a great resource. I think she can work with Mrs. Lin to get that onto the school website, as Mrs. Lin's your media specialist. And this should include the values and principles that St. Regis schools want to reflect in their data use, technology, and citizenship. And it should model, what they want students to do, and should be an easy to access resource for students and staff. So validity, why is this going to work? First, Mr. Sample's open communication and willingness to take blame will help teachers move forward and not feel like they're being called out. Rural communities, again, often have limited access to technology or internet access, so there are many grants available to them. And Mrs. Lin is very passionate about the school, and I think she will be one that will do what it takes to help students. She'll put her time and effort in, and that might be something where they need to think about possibly a stipend for those that are involved in the grant writing process. Mrs. Brandon has substantial background knowledge in copyright, and I think working with Mrs. Lin to put that copyright policy online would be a great way to help them work together and put aside their differences that they may have from this situation. Here are my references that I used for this presentation. I hope this was a succinct review of this case study, and just want to say that I really enjoyed this class. Thank you.